for showing up. I know that there's going to be some moments in this whole thing where I kind of get lost. And when that happens, I'm going to ask you guys to pick a number between a number and a number. And I have a little notebook back here that I put together in the last couple of weeks with stories and things that have happened in my life that are really funny. So, shall we go?
Yeah.
Okay, well, we all know Ken and Barbie. Okay, well, why didn't they ever have any kids? Ken comes in a different box. Now, speaking of kids, I've got a son, and many years ago when he was a little baby, I was holding him, and the phone rang, and I answered the phone, and in the midst of me being on the phone and not paying attention, he reached in his diaper, and he put his fingers in my mouth, and I suddenly realized what had happened, and I dropped the phone, and I threw up on my kid, and my kid starts screaming, and my wife comes in, she says, "What happened? Did you just throw up on the kid?" And I said, "I did." And she says, "Why did you do that?" And I say, "He pooped in my mouth." She said, "How did he do that?" And I said, "I asked him." Well, as time went on, you know, he got to be a little bit bigger, and there was these containers of steel that I had cut in half with a saw, and I was trying to smash them down with a sledgehammer. And I had these gloves on, and it had been raining, and things were kind of slippery. And on about the third swing, the sledgehammer came out of my hand and hit me right in the leg. And I went, "Son of a," and I looked up and my kid was standing there and I went, "Wheelbarrow." I hit the ground and I'm doing the Peter Griffin. And my kid says, "Dad, what's the son of a wheelbarrow?" And I said, "I think your mom's calling you." Now, I don't know how long I continued to go. It was probably 15 minutes. My kid came back out and he looks at me. I look up and he said, "Dad, did you get hit by the wheelbarrow again?" Yeah, but I'm...
Do you need a number now? Mine. Number, Todd. Come on, Todd.
Let me get my grandpa glasses. Oh, here's a good one. What about the weather? Okay. It has been colder than Polly Sims' scrotum riding his bicycle home from the Galley.
Not her.
He's got a bun warmer on his scrotum. He's riding home. He's got a bun warmer on his scrotum all year.
Did you guys hear about the new redneck Viagra?
Hey.
No.
It's 98% water and 2% Fix-A-Flat.
That stuff's miracle worker.
All right, here's a good one. Years ago, I went to visit my grandmother, and we were having a family dinner. And my grandma always made this famous pea salad. Okay, well, as she got up in her years, she had dentures. She's in a wheelchair. She's wheeled up to the end of the table. And she would make the salad right underneath of her. Well, she'd be eating it and tasting it, and, and she'd be talking, and, of course, And so, as years went by, there was always more pea salad left over than there had been the years before. I come in, and she's doing this, and she says, "Well, how are you, kiddo?" And I said, "Well, I'm good, And she says, "Well, you've always got a good joke. Tell me a joke. And I said, well, I got a story for you, Grandma. Well, back then I was in the floor covering business, and I went to measure this big job. And I had my friend Sean with me, and he was right on the other end of the tape measure. We meet the people, we're measuring the house, and they had this St. Bernard. And the St. Bernard keeps following us around the house. And we'd get in the room and it'd lay down and it'd start licking itself. And my buddy Sean, he finally goes, God, I wish I could do that. And I said, you better pet him first. He might bite you. I told this to my grandmother, and she spit her dentures out, and it landed in the bowl. And then she just grabs them like nothing, still laughing, and hands them to my aunt. Rinse these off.
Oh my.
When I was about 19, I lived in Anacortes, and my job, I rented a room from my great uncle, who was my grandmother's youngest brother. And he was a very extraordinary entrepreneur. And he did all kinds of things that, he owned fishing boats, he did this, he would buy and fix and sell cars, which is something that I kind of got from him. And my job at this time, he would hand me a gas card, a Polaroid camera, and a notebook. And he'd say, drive out in the country and look for cars that have grass growing around them. And I was like, well, this is going to be easy, So at the end of the week, the weekend had come, he'd start looking through and he'd be like, oh, well, that's a good one, okay. Oh, there's another good one. Then we'd go and we would take a look at these cars. Well, one day we went to an Eagles club and we're meeting somebody there. And we sit down to have lunch, and this gentleman I'd never met, they're having coffee. And he says to me, he says, hey, go find something to do for like an hour. I'm like, okay. So I come back. Now there's a bottle of Jack Daniels sitting between them that's 2/3 of the way gone. And I went, some serious stuff has gotten hashed out here, right? Well, all of a sudden, the guy that's with him, he kind of goes, and he throws up on himself. And my uncle's like, well, Todd, it's time to go. We're going to give him a ride home. And the guy's like, no, this is going to be really bad. My wife, she doesn't want me day drinking at all. And my uncle's like, no, here, it's no problem. Here, you just tell her that you helped a friend out who had been drinking, and here's $10. I'm going to slip it in your shirt. That's for the dry cleaning for the help. So we get this guy to his house, and I'm quite literally carrying this guy up to the door. And I ring the doorbell, and his wife comes in a bathrobe and curlers, and she's like, John, you've been drinking. He's like, oh, no. I was helping out a friend, and he threw up on me, and he put $10 in my pocket. She pulls it out, and she goes, this is a 20. He says, he shit my pants, too. Hey, that was a good one. Hey, by the way, it's National Beer Drinking Day in Washington. Cheers.
Every day.
So I got this friend in Friday Harbor, this guy Bubba McCutcheon, and he gets the opportunity to work for the town of Friday Harbor. And they love everything they're reading on his resume, and then they finally realize that he doesn't have a high school diploma. And so they bring him in for a second interview, and they say, look, if you just go up to the college and you get a GED, we're going to give you the job. And he's like, okay, what's a GED? No, it's a general education diploma. And if you pass this class, we're going to hire you. And he's like, oh, okay. So he goes and he takes the classes, and it's a couple weeks long, and gets down to the final exam, and the instructor is noticing that he's kind of having a little trouble. And he comes around and he's like, "Oh, Bubba, you're doing good. What's up?" He says, "Well, I got the arithmetic and the writing and everything." And he says, "But this last question, logical reasoning, I don't get it." And he says, "Well, it's kind of like this. Do you have a house?" Bubba says, "Yeah, I got a house." He says, "Well, logical reasoning leads me to believe that you might be married." He says, "Yeah, I'm married." And he says, "Well, that means you probably have a lawn too, right?" And he says, "Yeah." He says, "So logical reasoning tells me you probably have a weed eater." And he goes, "Yeah, oh, I get it." Well, he passes the test, and he's down at Herb's celebrating. He sits down next to his buddy Blackie, and Blackie goes, "Hey, heard you got a gad." And he's like, yeah, got me the job." And he says, "Well, was the test hard?" And he says, "Well, the arithmetic and everything, but," he says, "the logical reasoning was, it was really kind of difficult." And Blackie says, "What's logical reasoning?" He says, "Well, it's like this. Have you got a weed eater?" And he says, "Nope." He goes, "You're a queer."
Oh my gosh.
All right, this is a good ancient Galley joke, back when the bar used to be at this end and the restaurant was here, and my brother and I were little kids, and the walk-in cooler was here, and we're standing there. My dad's a bartender, and we're waiting for him, and Uncle Phil comes stumbling out, and he pissed himself, and he stops, and we're like, "Uncle Phil," and he's like, "Hey, how you boys doing?" And we're like, "Oh, we're good. What are you doing?" He says, "I'm going down to the Galley. You can't get a good drink at the Islander." That wasn't on the list, by the way.
Burn a moment.
Number 2. Your wife just screamed number 2.
Number 2. Oh, I told that one already.
Number 16.
Number 11.
All right, this is one for all of us that have been to a concert and we're having so much fun and we're up front and you gotta pee, but you don't want to go. So you wait, and you're waiting and you're waiting and you're waiting until you're like, "Oh, damn, I'm gonna have to go." And then about halfway there, you've been holding it so long that your left nut actually lifts from the pressure. And then you finally get there, and there is a line that's 100 yards long, and you're like, "Oh, God."
Yeah. Oh. You're making me hurt.
And then you finally get into the bathroom, and you get up to the urinal, and you can't go. And you're pushing, and you're pushing, and all of a sudden that left nut drops, and you shart your drawers. Now, that's not what really happened. I cut out of the line, went in through the exit. You know those big hand washing stations where the water's coming out? I went over in the corner, and I'm like, "Okay." And everything was going fine until I looked over, and there was a guy going. And I was just like, "Excuse me." All right, this one is, what is a hurricane in Florida, a tornado in Virginia, and a divorce in Mississippi all three have in common? Somebody's fixing to lose a trailer. Many years ago when I was single, I kind of ran into this gal a few times that I sort of liked. And one night she invited me back to her house, and she says, just a minute, I'm gonna grab some Vaseline. So she did, and all of a sudden I went, holy shit, that's not Vaseline, that's Nair. Oh! That one hurt.
Nair.
All right, well, a friend of mine's got a tattoo parlor down in Seattle, and he had this gal come in with a picture of Elvis, and she wanted it tattooed on her butt cheek. And he's like, okay, yeah, I can do this, but I've only got like 4 hours before I'm going to close, and this is kind of maybe a 5-hour job. She's like, oh, you can do it. I've seen your work. He's like, well, okay, I'll give it the best go I can. So he works on this thing, and he works hard, and it's just perfect. And he hands her a mirror, and there's a mirror behind him, and he says, well, ma'am, what do you think? And she goes, that doesn't look anything like Elvis. And he says, what are you talking about? It's perfect. She says, no, that doesn't look anything like Elvis. And he's like, look, I got to close, but if you want to come back here tomorrow and meet me in the morning, I'll do it again on the other side, and I'll do it better. And she's like, okay. So she comes back. He gets to work. And this thing is just immaculate. He puts the whole day into it. And again, he hands her the mirror behind. She looks at it. She says, that doesn't look anything like Elvis at all. What kind of a shop are you running here? He says, no, that looks just like Elvis. She's like, it doesn't. And he says, well, can I get a third opinion? And she's like, yeah, who's that going to be? He says, I'm going to walk out the door and grab the first guy I can find. So she goes out the door, they both go out the door, and there's a little wino sitting there. And the guy says, hey, I'll buy you another bottle if you come in here and settle a dispute. And so, he agrees. Get in there, she pulls her britches down, and little wino stands back, and he's looking. The guy says, well, and he says, I don't know who that is on the left, and I don't know who that is on the right, but the one in the middle is Willie Nelson. That one there makes me happier than a busload of fat girls on the way to see the Ricky Martin. That's pretty happy. I went into a convenience store one day with my buddy, and he was kind of a cranky old sod. And there was about 15, we called them baggy bastards. They were the kids that are holding their britches all the way down, and you can, underwear is clear up to here, and they were kind of being rude to everybody, and we get up there, and my buddy looks at him, and he says, hey, what famous rapper died today? And they're like, what? And he says, well, you're wearing your pants at half-mast. When I was a kid, I worked on a lot of fishing boats, and there was always this tradition that when you got on, you had to make your way, and so the captain would either make you eat a raw oyster or bite the head off of a herring or something, and well, pretty soon I wasn't that guy anymore. I was the guy that was getting to do that, and so there was this young guy that came on, and I handed him the oyster, and he was from New York, and he was just like, oh boy, I don't know. And I was like, oh, you got it. And so he put that thing in his mouth, and he started to swallow, and as soon as he did, I went, the oyster didn't make its way down.
Oh, yeah.
I would have this better worked out, but I got put up to this a couple weeks ago. Thank you, damn it, John.
Your manager? Your manager, John. Yay, John! Good job, John!
But I would like to thank you.
Jon Cade! Good idea! movie night at the Galley.
So I was in Cedar Woolley, and I had just gotten out of high school, and at that time I had long blonde hair. I wore a brown leather jacket, and the Cedar Woolley boys didn't really take too kindly to someone that looked like me, because they're all farmers and loggers, and they didn't have any idea that I came from an island where I'd been doing that same stuff my whole life. I just was kind of a rocker kid, and so there was like 5 of them they kind of surrounded me, and they were trying to pick a fight, and I'm trying to back out of this thing, and I'm just, they're like, yeah, you city slickers. I'm like, no, I'm from an island. Yeah, you don't know nothing about farming. And I went, we raised pigs, horses, and cows, and chickens, and, I've been bitten, kicked, slobbered, etc. They're like, oh, yeah, right, They start shoving me, and I was like, no. And finally one of them goes, and I'm starting to think, well, okay, I'm going to have to fight. And so guy pushes me one more time, and I said, I don't want to fight. He goes, what are you, a pussy? And I went, you are what you eat. Is that why you're such a dick? Here's what's cool. He went, this guy's okay. All right, this is a hair lip joke.
Oh no.
There was this little boy that lived next door to us when we lived in Mount Vernon, and he had just moved in, and just down the road was the LaVenture Elementary School, and we got to know him, and we were hanging out and having dinner, and first day of school's the next day, and I said, well, is he all ready? And his mom's like, yeah, he's got this, and I'm making sure that he asks the bus driver if this is the bus going to the elementary school before he gets on. I'm like, okay, so the bus pulls up that next morning, and all the kids get on, and the bus driver's looking at the kid, and he goes, hey, mister, is this the bus that goes to the elementary school? And all of a sudden, the door closes and the bus drives away. So the mom takes the kid to school. Well, the next day, the same thing happens. All the kids get on. He goes, hey, mister, is this the bus that goes to the elementary school in Lopez? The door closes. So the third day, the mom's like, okay, there's something up with this. And she can see that as the bus is pulling up, there's another adult right behind the bus driver. And the bus pulls up, the door opens, and the bus driver goes, there he is, that's that little bastard that's been making fun of me every morning. No, I got one more. There's this this hair lip that goes in. He wants to get a job at this toothbrush factory. And so he goes in and he applies, he fills out everything, and he gets called in for an interview. And the person that hires says to him, well, what would you like to do? And he says, I want to do door-to-door salesmanship with toothbrushes. He says, well, gosh, nobody's done that before. He says, oh, I would be the best one you ever had. He said, you'd be the only one we ever had. Well, that's what I'm saying. I could do it. I could sell every toothbrush in the... You just put me into the task and I can do it. So he says, okay, well, here's some toothbrushes, and go ahead and have at it. And so he goes to his first place. The door opens. Yeah, can I help you? Hi, you want to buy a toothbrush? No, thank you. This goes on for the whole week. Thursday morning, guy shows up to work. The boss comes in and sees the guy sitting there, and he says, well, did you sell the toothbrushes? He says, yep, sold every one of them. He says, how did you do that? He says, well, I went to the airport, and I set up a big sign that said, free chips and dip, and I had the chips and dip there. They come along and they take a chip and they put it in the dip and they go, God, that tastes like shit. And I'd say it is. You want to buy a toothbrush? I don't think we're ready for that one yet.
We're ready, Todd. We're ready.
Have you ever been caught playing with yourself in the closet? That doesn't work.
Sorry.
You're supposed to say no, and I'm supposed to say it's a good place to hide, isn't it?
I never had it.
Well, there's one.
I got one for you.
Pick another. 50
All right, here's another one. When I was thinking about getting married, I went to visit my grandma, and I said, "Hey, Grandma, I met somebody great. I'm thinking about getting married." And you know what she said? "Close the door, I'm trying to poop." And then she kept talking to me there through the crack in the door. Just, "I don't know what you want to get married for. You've only been dating that girl for 2 or 3 months." It's like, Grandma, pinch off the stink prickle and we'll finish this conversation in the kitchen. I used to play music a lot at the China Pearl in Friday Harbor, and I got to know the owner, Charles, real well. And he was always kind of a prankster. And so one night when there was a band playing and the place was kind of packed, I pulled a deadly one on him. I came in the door and I saw him standing in front of the band, and the stage is there, and he's watching. And he looks at me, I wave, and right then, I let the worst fart anybody could. And I walked right up to Charles and I stopped and I said, "Charles, somebody's smoking pot in here." And he goes, "Oh, God!" "Oh, you son of a bitch!" A few years ago, my brother and I moved my mom from Mount Vernon to Livingston in Montana. And I had to fly back. So I went to the Bozeman Airport Hair Care Salon and Tire Center. You ever been there? I shit you not. The place is this big. That's all I got on that. But so my dad's got 4 kids. He's got 2 with my mom and 2 with my stepmom. I don't call her stepmom, she's Mama Di. But here's the story. Growing up, I couldn't wait to get out of the house. My brother, he hung around for several years, so there was 50% on failure to launch. He finally moved out. Well, then he had 2 kids with my stepmom, and one of them moved out, she became a nurse, and the other one's still there, so 50% again. However, if you put the whole equation together, he's down to 25%. That's a pretty good drop. Now, my sister's going to kill me for saying this, and it's not true, but, she became a nurse, and I came up with this great joke where I go to visit her, and she goes to reach into her pocket, and she pulls out a rectal thermometer, and she goes, "Where's my pen?" She's going to kill me. Okay, this one's kind of bad, but do you know the difference between a bitch and a hoe? Well, the hoe is the one that comes through town and sleeps with everybody. The bitch is the one that comes through town and sleeps with everybody but you. That's along the lines of, how do drugs keep getting into jail? Some asshole keeps smuggling them in. Now here's a true story. When I was a kid, I had gone through hunter safeties course, and I had gotten my green card so that I could go hunting. And my uncle came up and he brought a buddy with him, and we went just down out of our property and across the fields, and I shot my first deer. And I forgot to bring my license and my tag with me. Now it was only 600 yards across the way, but a game warden saw us from the road dragging this deer. And he came down and he was pretty pissed at me. And I was like, well, and he says, well, we're going to wait here. You go get that tag. So I went and got the tag and I brought it back. I put it on the deer. Whew, everything was okay. Now, 2 years later, a game warden comes pulling into our driveway just randomly for no reason. And we're doing our chores, my brother and I, and my dad's actually out on a fishing boat, and my grandmother's not home yet, and he pulls up and he gets out and he says, "Are your parents here?" And I said, "Well, no, my grandmother will be here in a little while." And he says, "Well, I'm game warden and I'm here just to follow up and make sure that you don't have any illegal deer or anything else on the property." And I was like, "Well, you shouldn't." He goes, No. I'm here to check the place." And I said, "Well, okay, but you might want to stay out of that first couple of acres." And he pulls out his badge and he says, "Do you see this? The federal government makes it so that they have instilled this in me to go inspect properties, and nobody can stop me from doing it." And I'm like, "Okay, fine." So I go back to do what I'm doing. About 15 minutes go by and I hear this screaming. And it's like, "Ah!" And so I walk over to that front corner property that I just said, tried to warn him about. And here is my cousin's little pony named Taffy. Pissed off little pony, chasing him. Across the field. Well, my brother hears everything, and by this time I'm leaning on the fence and I'm watching. And my brother goes, "The hell's going on?" And I was like, he didn't want to listen. He goes, "Well, are you going to help him?" And I went, give it a minute, Pretty soon there's a shoe over there and the hat's over there, and he bails over the fence, and my brother says, "You didn't do anything." And I went, "You should have showed him your badge." We have any Marvel and DC comic fans in here? Which one do you think's better? Marvel? Yeah. Well, I had an argument with somebody that said, "No, it's DC." And I was like, "Who do they got?" They said, "Superman." And I went, "That's a good one. That's a good one." Batman. And I went, "Nah, maybe." Yeah. Wonder Woman. That's another good one. And then he goes, Green Lantern. And I went, "Green Lantern? What kind of power does he have?" He says, "He has a ring that gives him power." And I went, "I don't know any man that wears a ring that has power." And if you're not laughing right now, you're sitting next to kryptonite.
That was an even better follow-up.
So it's that time of year where those little tiny black ants come out of nowhere and they're on everything. Your counters, I don't know, but I read someplace that if you take sugar and borax and you mix them together, that it makes them go away. So I had little piles of this all over my house, and I did it in the morning and I came back in the afternoon and I went, "My God, looks like I just had a party with Adam Hayes and Charlie Sheen."
Oh!
Meth's a hell of a drug.
I don't know if I know him. That's good.
Really did.
I don't either. I don't know if I know him.
So the night that my kid was born, I was actually on the stage at Herb's playing. And my wife's Uncle Rick, who's a guy that's 6'11" and a fireman, comes walking in the door, and I'm playing, and he's looking around, and I don't think he quite figured out that I was actually there playing, because he looked everywhere except at the stage. Well, he finally saw me, and he comes walking right up to me, and I'm playing, and I'm just about to do a lead, and he goes, and I went, "Come around the speakers so I can hear you." And he's like, "You're having a baby." And I went, "Yeah, I know." And he goes, "No, right now." And I went, "Oh, shit. Just a second." I had a lead I had to whip out, and then I went, "Hey, thank you. How's everybody doing tonight?" And they're, "Woo!" And I was like, "I'm having a baby. Woo! I gotta go." What? So I set my stuff down, and Uncle Rick says, "Follow me, I'm a fireman." I beat him by 7 minutes. So our plan was that we were going to hop in an airplane and we were going to fly over to Anacortes, and that's where our doctor was. And, well, it didn't quite work out that way. Chase was actually born in Friday Harbor. Now, here's where the story gets a little bit funny. We're in there, and I've got a hold of my wife's hand, and her grandmother's up by the head, by her head, making her feel better. "It's okay, hon," and I got a grip, and there's some EMTs there, and the doctor's down on the other side, and I'm going, "Man, boy, I don't know why my wife is this strong." And the EMT says, "Oh no, you need to hold her hand like this." And suddenly I'm like, "The fuck? That's not better." And she was not going to let go. And right at that point, the doctor says, "Well, hey, do you want to come down here and see your kid be born?" And I went, "Hell no, I don't want to see a St. Bernard coming through the cat door." I turned and I looked at Grandma, and I'll tell you what, if looks could kill. The doctor laughed. And then my wife says, "Can I get something for the pain?" He says, "Well, I can give you a Tylenol, but the kid will be out before it does any effect." Which it happened. Hey, they may not be great, but they're in a row. Oh, here's a really good one. I keep trying to make protein shakes, but they keep turning into margaritas. Well, after the fifth one, I thought, well, shit, I should put some coconut in there. Voila, pina colada. All right, there's these two Middle Eastern guys, and it's just after 9/11, and they decide that they want to go join Al Qaeda, and so they set off across the desert, and the first town they come to, it says Camelot, and the first one he says, "Habib, I think this is the place. I think we find what we need a camel." And he says, "Oh yes, Abdul, we need a camel. This is Camelot. We'll find a camel." So they go through the whole place, and all the camels have already been taken. And they come across this thing that says burro. So they go, and they're thinking, maybe a burro will work. So they get in there, and they said, "Sir, do you have a burro?" He says, "Oh, many burro, but only one burro that could get you on that journey. That's a long, long way. You must make sure you stop at Oasis and fill him up with water, or you will never make it." They're like, okay. So they take off, they buy the thing, and they're going, and they get to the Oasis, and they're both, the minute they see the water, they're in it, they're drinking, and the donkey's just standing there. And he says, "Babe, what's the matter with this beast?" He says, "I do not know." He says, "Maybe we shove him down into the water." So they do, and he just stands there. So they're sitting there, and they're waiting. The babe says, "Abdul, we should just go." He says, "Oh no, that man," he said, "if we go, we will never make it, we will die." He's like, "But what do we do?" He says, "I have idea. You get behind, push into water again, I jump on his head, hold on to his ears, shove his face into the water, and you get into the back and you start sucking and we fill him up manually. Oh, babe, that's a great idea. All right, are you ready? Yes. Oh, babe, lift his head. I think we're sucking mud. Years later, I ran into a really friendly guy from somewhere in the Middle East. And I went into a 7-Eleven. He goes, "Oh, good evening. Welcome to 7-Eleven. I'm Akeem and I will be your cashier. Oh, would you like a napkin with that hustler, sir?"
With the what? With the what? Oh, God.
With a hustler.
It took me a second. Oh.
Now, forgive me. I don't mean to make a joke about playing with myself. I don't play with myself. I was cleaning it once, though, and it went off.
Do it, Ronnie. I get it now.
Todd, shame on you.
Hey, there had to be one.
There you go.
Well, right after my kid was born, my wife and I, we had a roommate. My friend Sean, same guy with the carpet measuring. And we get up in the morning and we take off and we've got some stuff to do, and we come back and Sean walks up and he says, "Man, don't drink the milk in the refrigerator." And I was like, "Why?" And he says, "Oh, it tastes funny." And I went, "What milk?" He says, "The milk in the refrigerator." I said, "Show me." I go over there and open the thing, and he says, "That milk." And I went, "That's breast milk." He goes, "Ooh."
Stuff's great on cereal, though.
Surprisingly sweet.
Sweet cream.
You know this stuff. Come on. You're my...
All right, now I know that you've all heard the story of the 3 bears, but you haven't heard mine. The story of the 3 bears is, I'm going to tell it. Daddy is a home brewer. He makes just the most wonderful beer, all different kinds. Mama Bear is absolutely into beans. String beans, green beans, black beans, lima beans, kidney beans, garbanzo beans. She makes all kinds of things out of this stuff. And little baby bear has every Elvis Presley album made. Well, they go for a walk in the forest, and they come back, and the door is open. I kind of think this is a little bit strange, so they go into the house, and all of a sudden you hear the daddy bear, "Somebody's been drinking my beer." And all of a sudden you hear the mama bear, "Somebody's been into my beans." And then you hear the little baby bear, he says, "Somebody's been playing my Elvis records and they're all scratched." And right then this little squirrel jumps up on the windowsill and does one of these. Oops, I'm all shook up. I have more, but I have to take a pause for the cause. You guys are great. Recovering company in Friday Harbor.